on manufacturing. And you know, as a country, we have a very ambitious goal of becoming an industrializing country by 2030. We're also hoping to become a middle-income country by then. So this is what we are focusing on tonight, just looking at what is the state of the manufacturing sector in the country and what are the challenges and opportunities. We have key stakeholders with us here at the Daystar University Valley Road campus to help us discuss this. But I'm not alone. Karibuni sana. My name is Sharon Momanyi. I'm here with my colleague, business editor, Abby Agina. Abby.
Well, many thanks, Sharon. Indeed, an exciting day it is for the country as well as for KTN News. Today we'll be discussing the manufacturing agenda, the state of manufacturing in the country. We'll also be having some interesting discussions happening. Over and above that, Sharon, will be engaging with our live audience here. And of course, we shall also be giving our viewers who are watching us on the various social media platforms a chance to engage with us. Remember, you can use the hashtag TransformKenyaSG, and you can tweet at KTN News KE. And of course, we look forward to driving this exciting discussion tonight, Sharon.
Just a couple of days ago, we had an exclusive one-on-one discussion with the President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta, and he just outlined some of the priorities that his government has in this particular sector. And we just want to start with a soundbite from that interview, just to set the tone of our discussion tonight. And after that, I will be introducing our panel.
Manufacturing is a critical component both of our ability to provide healthcare, of our ability to provide housing, of our ability to provide food to our people, right? So it is a critical ingredient of all the pillars that we have set out for ourselves. So when we say that we are focused on improving the business environment, that's why we have worked so hard to try and remove all the barriers to doing business. That's why we've improved, I think from the time we took office, from number 120, now we are 60, and we are pushing to bring ourselves to below the 50 mark. In not too long to go. That is why we're out there every day trying to visit countries, to attract investors, to attract capital, to come and invest and build Kenya. This is all aimed at just that one thing. All these will create opportunities for our people. That's why we're focused on our investment in roads. That's why we're focused on our investment in electricity and all the other enablers, ICT and everything else, because we need to be able, and that's why I said it's good to first of all go back to the base. Why the focus? The focus is so that we can achieve, you know, all these different agendas together.
Right, so ladies and gentlemen, let me take this opportunity to welcome you once again to this forum tonight. And we want to make it as interactive as possible. So even as we start this discussion, if there's any question you would have along the way or an input, just feel free to raise your hand so that we have a very lively and engaging conversation. So allow me to introduce our panel tonight. And I will start from my immediate left and introduce Mr. Rakesh Rao, who is the CEO of Crown Paints. And right next to him is Flora Mutahi, who is the CEO, I beg your pardon, this is Rita Kavashe, who is the MD of Isuzu East Africa. Many thanks for joining us this evening, Rita. And right next to Rita, we have our CS for Trade, Cooperatives and Industries, Mr. Peter Munya. Thank you, sir, for joining us. And then we have Flora Mutahi. I really jumped in to introduce you ahead of time. Flora is the CEO of Melvish Marsh International and is also the chairperson for the Anti-Counterfeit Authority. Thank you for joining us this evening. And right next to her, we have Stephen Ogenga, who is the Acting Director General at the National Industrial Training Authority. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us tonight. Last but not least, at my extreme left is Engineer Joseph Njoroge, who is the PS at the Ministry of Energy. You know, the discussions about cost of energy and what is very key in the subject of manufacturing. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for making time for us. So right, we want to start by looking at the state of Kenya's manufacturing sector, just to set the tone for our discussion tonight. And a survey that was dubbed the Manufacturing Barometer for the first quarter of 2019 showed that 47% of industries were operating at about half capacity, and that 33% operated at 75% of installed capacity, a fifth of them operating at near full capacity. Just taking a look at how much are we doing to maximize on our potential. And I want to start with you, Bwana CS. There is a renewed interest in the manufacturing sector through the Big Four agenda. Does this come with a promise for a quantum leap in terms of growth in the sector?
Yes, indeed. We are doing everything that is within our ability to make sure that we turn around this very important sector. We are changing policy in a big way. If you listen to what the president has said, we've, for example, looked at the enablers that impact on industry, and we've put in our resources there. We have also done a lot of policy change to make sure that we create the right environment for industries to thrive, and even for new ones to come up. And part of the policy change, obviously, is a reduction of making sure that the cost of doing business comes down by looking at, for example, cost of power, looking at infrastructure, making sure that we have proper infrastructure, making it also easy to register companies, looking at standards also to make sure that standards are used for purposes of enabling industries rather than impeding industries, and dealing with counterfeits, make sure that there is no competition from counterfeits, so that proper industries that produce quality goods are able to thrive. Looking also at the tax, for example, one of the biggest challenges that has been there has been VAT withholding, which we have reduced from 6% now to 2%. We are also looking at specific sectors, so we have policies focusing on specific sectors, automotive industry sector, and we have a policy that we have done that is almost coming out that is also intended to spur that sector. We're looking at the wood industry, we are looking at agro-processing. We have 9 key sectors or value chains, if you like, that we are focusing on, that we think are impactful in terms of spurring industrialization. We have also cross-cutting policies like Build Kenya, Buy Kenya, Build Kenya, and local content, where we are insisting on using local products to value add on whatever other products we may bring from outside. And we are also encouraging, right now in government, we are saying, if something is available locally, there's no need of government importing.
Right.
So that government buys local.
Right.
So there is a whole range of policy changes that are only towards enabling this very, very important sector to thrive and to revive it.
Right.
And you can see results already. If you look at last year, the sector grew by 4.2% from the previous 0.8%. This year, and given what we have already done, I'm sure you'll see better growth in that sector. So I think we are in the right direction. What we need is support from you, support from the public, so that we move this sector forward.
All right. And just allow me to stay with you to ask you to just speak a little bit specifically about some of the policy, decisions that you're making. Maybe we can talk about what are the specific sectors, because when you talk about manufacturing, it's quite wide. What are the specific areas and sectors of interest to the country, and how can we maximize on their profitability?
Well, the sectors that we are focusing on, I've already seen, we are looking at nine value chains. Key among them is agro-processing, looking at what we can do to add value to our local agricultural produce, dairy, flowers, horticulture, anything that we are able to produce here, cotton, all the agro-processing, agro-products that we have. What can we do to increase value addition so that we have agro-based industries that are thriving using local resources? We are also looking at the wood industry, manufacturing, furniture and building materials and all that, and building sector. That's why you can see we are also talking about affordable housing, to Europe spa, production of building materials, both wood and even other materials, use of cement and ceramics and all other materials that we can produce locally to do construction of housing. We are also looking at specifically wood, because we know local furniture is an industry that we can easily pull through. We are looking at mining also, in terms of, since we are now an oil economy, soon we are going to be an oil economy. We are looking at what we can do to add value to that oil when it will be there. What we can do also to extract the other minerals that are there, that we can also, add value on them. We are also looking at ICT. ICT is a critical. Kenya having been a leader in technological transformation, we are looking at what we can do, and that's why you can see fast track of CONSA to make sure that we have, we become a hub for ICT transformation.
Right.
We are looking at automotive industry. I've already said the policy is already there, almost concluded. We are already implementing part of it, and I'm sure you have heard, for example, we have stopped importation of certain second-hand spare parts that used to be brought here that are not dangerous. We are looking at what we can do to support the car assembly sector that has been operating under very low capacity because of policies that are not enabling to that sector. We're looking at also the leather value chain, looking at our livestock and what we can do to instead of exporting raw hides and what is called wet blue, we want to go all the way, produce final products, make shoes, make bags, make leather products locally, so that we don't export our hides and skin, then buy those products back.
Okay.
We are looking at textiles and clothing, and you can see recently the president opening Rivertex, and we are also reviving, already we are in the process of working out a plan to revive all the other textile factories that closed down, Kikomi, Mountex, and all the other, even as we build new ones and as even we support.
Okay, sir. And we'll come and look at the other ones shortly. Let me just allow me to bring in Rita. You mentioned the automotive industry, and just looking at that from an industry perspective, how poised is the industry to create employment, to thrive at maximizing its capacity, and also then lead to social inclusion?
Yeah. So the auto sector, and thank you, the CS is right in the sense that the policy itself has not been yet made into law, but parts of that policy are already being implemented. For instance, in our sector, government has made a decision to buy locally produced goods. And when that conversation is taking place, already we have seen quite a number of investors who are not in country already making inroads, making inquiries on how to come into the country. And in the last 2 years already, 3-4 more international players have started to do some form of local assembly. And that means new job for our people. But as we scale up manufacturing, there are some gaps that are beginning to show that we need to plug in, especially in the value chain, around capacity of the people to be able to supply to the increased demand that is likely to show up. So as companies take up this new opportunity, there is work to be done around developing these capacities, for the value chain, for industry to go into the space of some of the SMEs, because these big businesses are serviced by a whole number of SMEs. If you look at auto sector value chain, there are people who are doing body fabrication, there are people who are doing seats. The work is a lot. So how do they then be able to service this emerging new opportunity in terms of materials, quality, cost, delivery? So those are some of the key challenges that now we are facing, and looking at opportunities to scale these SMEs to be able to really take up this opportunity. So yes, jobs will be created, jobs are being created, but capacity is the next thing that we need to address for Kenya to be truly competitive, because we are competing for investment resource, not only here, but big corporations are making decisions based on who is more attractive. And I think we're going to hear about cost of energy. Power could be available. Is it consistent? Should we continue to have standby generators because we are scared that power might go off when heavy production is going around? So there's a lot of infrastructural issues that still need to be sorted out as we gear up for increased manufacturing in the country.
Right. And just speaking about SMEs, let me just straight away bring in Flora into this conversation. And you've had experience building a company, that's Melvin's Tea, right from the scratch to being a giant in the tea industry. Maybe you can share some of the lessons. What was the environment like for an SME building your company up, and what opportunities also exist?
Thank you very much. Yes, like you mentioned, I started Melvin's Tea about 24 years ago. And that's because I was one of those people, I didn't have a career. And I was trained as an auditor, and I didn't want to do audit, and I went into business. But that's the time there was no such thing as entrepreneurship. Actually, business was for failures. So I had to fight already. The environment there was, you're already fighting. So when you're saying, I want to do business, they're like, no, that's something for failures. But I pushed on, and I tried to, registering the business at the time was, I guess at the time was not too difficult. But the difficulties I have been facing going along is, first of all, like she mentioned, is capacity building. I knew I wanted to do tea. Of course, there was a giant a monopoly in the market that had just been lifted. So of course I knew I had to do something different, and that's when I thought of coming up with flavored tea. However, where do I learn about that? How do I find out? You remember I was a trained auditor and a renegade. So I went around to the universities and said, this is what I want to do. I went to try and find out about tea, and there was nothing. So those are the kind of challenges that one is already faced with. I literally had to go to a producer for 3 weeks in disguise, saying that I'm a university student, to learn how to taste tea. So these are the things that we need to make available now, easily for entrepreneurs to actually be able to just get up and go, if you want them to succeed. If the other thing I started facing challenges is, where do I get my machinery? Who's going to do my machinery for me? Where am I going to get my packaging? And what I had to do is literally go around the streets asking, who does this? Who does this? Go into the industrial area. Of course, you hear the cost of a machine, you run away because I had no capital. I ran away. I find out where else can I find this? But there were small organizations, similar to what CAM offers now, Chamber and whatever, where they would literally listen to you and help you sort of capacity build. So my message to people who are trying to build businesses is join these organizations. They help you. They're a hub to sort of grow you. Other challenges I faced, of course, was where do I house myself? Fortunately, that was the time of Kenya Industrial Estate, so I was able to get a go down there pretty reasonably. But I do know today somebody starting a business would find it very difficult to be able to afford a proper go down. Actually, to be honest, I started in an office first, and then I moved into a go down. So those were sort of the challenges I faced. Distribution was another one. I guess we have a very complex, we don't move up the supply chain in Kenya. So if you're a manufacturer, you literally have to manufacture, market, brand, distribute, and you know, do the full circle. Whereas if you are based somewhere like in the States, I know a friend of mine started a tea company a couple of years later, literally goes to somebody, does the formulation, you know, goes to somebody else who warehouses it and somebody else who sells it. So basically her work was just to market the product.
Right.
So this is where we really literally need to get our country to. And I believe we're getting there with contract
And
packing.
I'll come back to that, because now we have to talk at one point about the entire value chain of our products. But you talked about capacity building, and this is where I want to bring Stephen, who's seated right next to you, in terms of you wanted some particular skill sets which then were not readily available. Maybe, Stephen, you could talk to us about that in terms of what we are doing in terms of training personnel for specific industries that, you know, will drive then our economy to the next level.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I think I want to borrow from your interview with His Excellency the President the other day, and I recall that at one point you requested him to talk about a signature product that he feels will be able to brand Kenya. And exactly, he didn't mince his words. He said that human capital, qualified human capital, it will be the signature product in terms of this industrial philosophy. And I want to agree with him, because we are saying that for us to accelerate the development of our economy and therefore the Big Four agenda through manufacturing, the principal enabler in terms of the drivers of the Big Four agenda, especially the manufacturing sector, is basically human capital. And therefore you can see that when you look at the manufacturing sector in terms of the GDP, is actually a principal contributor. But over and above that, even if you look at the national budget, the major sector that the government actually puts emphasis on, about 35% of the budget, is actually towards education. And therefore we are saying that the government is putting a lot of emphasis in terms of making sure that driving the human capital in terms of the entire education system actually propagates the need to be able to support our industries in that context. So when we talk of capacity building, we are saying that there are several strategies that the government has put in place, including one, emphasis on skilling, strategic skilling informed by labor market demands. And this is seen in terms of the emphasis that the government is putting on in the area of vocational skilling. Mm-hmm. And therefore, when you look at the TVET sector, you can see the kind of play that that sector actually plays in terms of contributing to the economy. The other thing is that you can see that in terms of Ministry of Labor, we have several players and enablers that have come into play. And therefore, the National Industrial Training Authority is actually now mandated to be able to ensure that we have an adequate supply of skilled manpower to be able to support the demands of the industry. And this is done strategically to the extent that we look at what the industry is demanding. Mm-hmm. But of course, we have gaps in terms of the mismatch between the trends of the economy and also the occupational requirements. And this is a problem. And the moment we have weak linkages between economic trends and occupational requirements of the industry, then we will obviously say that we will lack real-time information that will inform the kind of skill areas that must be prepared to be able to support the industry. Mm-hmm. But over and above that, of course, we are saying that there are a lot of strategies that have been put in place. One is to ensure that the sectors, the training institutions are principally enabled in terms of finance, in terms of capital. There's a lot of strategies in terms of ensuring that the trainers are always upskilled, and that equipment and tools that are very close to the kind of technology in the industry are availed for the training sectors. Right. So we are saying that really when we emphasize on the development of human capital, and of course look at the emphasis through the agencies of the ministries, almost every ministry has a sector that tends to be able to develop certain skills. If you go to the Ministry of Education, we have the entire TVET universities and secondary education. If you go to the Ministry of Labor, of course, we have National Industrial Training Authority. Ministry of Agriculture have AHITIS. Ministry of Health, MTCs. So we are saying that all sectors that have been outlined by the CS and the other panelists are really being serviced from every other effort that the government is putting in place.
Right, and it'll be key to listen from the voice of the companies and the manufacturers that we have here. Just if this is something you find readily available in the market, if you want a welder, do we have? We were just talking with Abby before this that there are only 2 skilled welders in the country. So just to actually put the figures and have a defined state of trained personnel, it would be very important to talk about that. And if you have any questions so far, Abby will be taking some of them in just a bit. So you'll just be raising your hand and directing to whichever panelist you want to address that particular question. And I want to talk about ease of doing business. And I want to bring in Rakesh as a key manufacturer in the country, particularly in the sector of paints. What has been your experience in terms of cost of production, particularly?
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. I really appreciate what government is doing at the moment, and because I operate East Africa, and I found that Kenya is a little bit more easy to do business. We have a lot of challenges in other East African countries, but I think we should not look into that point of view. We have to be look into the global player. I think Kenya has a great potentials and a great human capital, and we really can be a competitive in the world markets and can make a big hub. I'm just giving example like Switzerland can export chocolate the whole world. Why Kenya cannot do it? It just been talking about building a capacity inside. If you talk about to ease out a business, yeah, of course I understand the government has their own challenges, but we can suggest few things. Probably like have a one window systems, where if industrialists or manufacturers have the problems, they can't go to 10 agencies and waste their time. So people generally give up. So if they have a one window and we can write to them and someone can really help them out, it can ease out the pressures to let manufacturers, put a time to manufacturing, become a competitive, focus on processes, cost cuttings, and make a competitive products, and maybe try to create more job opportunities. But at the moment, there's a lot of hassle. We have to keep on moving to multiple agencies to have a lot of issues to sort it out. Like, for example, now the new SGR, of course, has been glory to Kenya. But for us as a manufacturer, our cost of input has gone up by 3 to 4%. There's a lot of coordination required between KPA, KRA, HGR, to make the product, to make the system more efficient, and we can get a product more faster. We do not pay damages at a port, and then sometimes become very difficult for us because at the moment there's a lot of congestions and we have a lot of challenges. So in anything, when you develop infrastructures, I hope the motto of that was cutting the cost, but the cost is going up. So I think this is a real challenge which we have. Now the county has come, the county, then KBS, national governments, they have a lot of coordination required. They have various inspection agencies, compliance agencies for government.
Right.
They come and they have a different, song to sing about. So if you really ask today, I'm strongly feel that the way, the customer service, I think the way we operate a word that the customer is a king and we focus a lot on customer services. Mm-hmm. I think I request Honorable to come with a customer charter. You make a charter and what you want to deliver to the manufacturer. Mm-hmm. Once you commit, and if it doesn't happen, then take the responsibilities. Because if we keep on talking about systems, processes, we are doing well, I think we are not going to reach anywhere. Let it be a specific, mm-hmm. and if you do not do it, what will be the penalty? Even today, I'm running my paint company. If my people fail to do it, I compensate customers,
right.
And that's why my brand becomes strong. Mm-hmm. So I think if really would like to invite people to invest in Kenya, we have to very strongly come with a customer charter. We have to have a serious commitment. We can tell them, yes, you come and invest. We can tell you this is return on investment, you can get it, okay? make a one-window systems, promote our country. We have a great logistic, infrastructures. We are focused on infrastructures, and try to have a serious meeting. We need to go to the other countries, look for investors to come in, and then probably, I think, if all is happened, then maybe people will love to come.
Right.
And people will invest in Kenya.
Right. And just talking about, and we'll be taking the questions just shortly, let me bring in P.S. Njoroge, talking about cost of production. And it has been an issue that has consistently come up in terms of cost of energy. Maybe you can talk to us about strategies that you're employing as a ministry, and are there particular incentives, especially to companies that are high, producing high intensive in terms of consumption of energy?
Thank you, Sharon. Yes, indeed, we first of all acknowledge that energy is a critical enabler. If you talk about Vision 2030, if you talk about the Big Four, and more so when we talk about manufacturing, it is a very critical enabler. Literally, all manufacturing, in one way or another, must rely on energy to be undertaken. Having that recognition since the year 2000, you will acknowledge, Sharon, that there are times when we used to do what we call rationing of electricity, because most of our energy was hydro-based. But as a result of recognizing the dangers of weather effect, or if you want to call it climate change effects, we did experience times when we had drought, and therefore we had to even switch off customers at certain times. And I do know that manufacturers suffered a lot. We looked at the entire chain, and particularly in the last 10 years or so, we've put in a lot of investment to ensure that our generation, our transmission, because once you generate power, it is at times very distant from the users, and therefore you have to transmit that power, distribute it, and recently we have also recognized the need to make sure that that product reaches the customer, and that is the last mile to ensure that the customer is accessed. Looking at generation, for example, we have had a lot of diversification. We've added a lot of power into the grid. Our hydro used to be about 80% contribution to the mix. But our hydro currently is just about 35%. We've had geothermal undertake the contribution of hydro. And geothermal is a sustainable resource. It is not affected by climate change. It is available throughout. So we've deliberately looked at geothermal as our major flagship source of base energy source. And in the last couple of years, say 5 years, 6 years or so, we've more than doubled the geothermal capacity. In the next one month or so, we are going to add yet another 168 megawatts into the grid, and that will put geothermal as a major contributor of our energy mix, maybe about 60%. In terms of cost, geothermal is again comparatively low priced, especially when you compare it with thermal, because we've managed to displace the usage of thermal to the extent that currently, although thermal is about 28% of the installed capacity, the contribution is just about 10%. Geothermal is even slightly less than thermal, but the contribution is hitting 50%. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we have diversified to wind, we have diversified to solar. Wind is already almost overtaking the contribution of thermal. Right. It's about 13%. We've got some solar, slightly lower, just about 3%. But looking at the programs that we have in place, we have several transmission lines which are going to transmit power from the generators to the distribution areas. We have more than doubled the length of the transmission lines just in the last 5 years or so.
Right.
And going forward, I do acknowledge that, yes, we are not yet where we want to be, especially in terms of cost of electricity. But I do know that with the efforts we are making and with the high injection of revenues or rather from on capital from the government, I do see ourselves certainly making quite a big significant reduction in terms of the cost of power. It's a chicken and egg situation, though, that since there are some fixed costs that must be incurred in any power system, and in any other system, there are fixed costs. The more we consume as consumers of electricity,
Right.
the less we are likely to reduce the cost. And therefore, we must make sure that our consumption, that is what we would call sales from the supplier side, sales increase so that we can be able to distribute the high fixed costs to a bigger number of the sales, and therefore reduce the cost. So it's a chicken and egg situation.
We must come back to that because we have to go on a break now, sir. But we'll come back particularly to talk about what is the place of foreign investors, coming into our power mix. Will that help to make, energy cheaper? And what is happening in that front at this particular point in time? So we'll come back with that. And I'm sure there's so many questions that are coming in also from our social media. But now we have to take a short break, and we'll also be going to our Kiswahili News Bulletin. But right now we are taking a look at a story that is pointing the state of manufacturing sector in the country.
For any manufacturer to break even, one must enjoy a favorable tax regime, coupled with lower power costs. A look at this year's budget statement, manufacturers got deductions of 30% of total electricity as rebate, as well as a promise from the state to expedite value-added tax refunds, with a rider that will also see a reduction of the VAT withholding rate from the current 6% to 2% and prioritizing payment of pending bills. According to Pwani Oil Commercial Director Rajul Malde, these are key incentives that will accelerate growth of industries.
So incentives for plastic recycling, reduction in corporate tax payable for all recycling projects, incentives for renewable energy, for solar, wind, etc. Reduction or removal of the import declaration fees for raw material imports, removal of railway development levy for raw material imports. Those are all positive signs. Removal of the cap, interest rate cap, will actually spur economic growth, because what happens now is the small and medium-time enterprises will be able to access credit from banks. They may be higher risk, and therefore the risk-reward ratio for the bank actually gets satisfied now, and that money starts circulating. So that will help aid demand creation to a large extent.
Malde, however, says restrictions such as non-tariff barriers for products from Kenya by Tanzania, Uganda and Rwanda has made doing business in the East African community very difficult.
Various exemptions that or stay orders that our neighboring countries have taken against the common external tariffs has resulted in our products or Kenyan products going into those countries at an expensive rate, and their products coming into this country at a cheaper rate or at the agreed CET rates. Now that makes an unfair platform for the economy and for Kenyan manufacturers in particular.
In the manufacturing sector, the biggest challenge they faced is the cost of doing business in Kenya. Electricity has remained high. If you look at the whole structure of how they get their licenses, whether from the county government or the national government, it's quite bureaucratic in nature. And there's competition from whether it's counterfeits, whether it's counter brands, whether it's other illegal imports. That remains a huge challenge for our manufacturing sectors.
Kenya's exports grew in value from 594 billion shillings in 2017 to 613 billion in 2018, representing a 3.2% increment. At the same time, the balance of trade deficit rose by 1.4% from 1.13 trillion shillings in 2017 to 1.15 trillion in 2018. Government has laid down an export strategy to ensure exports grow faster to bridge the trade gap.
2018, Kenya's major exports included tea, horticulture, articles of apparel and clothing accessories, coffee, titanium ores and concentrates, all accounting for 62% of the merchandise exports. This is one of the reasons why Kenya is focusing on diversifying products into new ones with a view to increase opportunities for foreign exchange, wealth and job creation.
Other interventions include Kenya's push for the realization of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area that guarantees Kenya a market opportunity of about 1.3 billion people. Among the top 25 Kenya export destination countries, 10 are from Africa, namely Uganda, Egypt, Rwanda, Sudan, Tanzania, DRC, Somalia, South Sudan, Ethiopia, and Burundi. Kenya's exports to Africa accounted for 35% of total exports in 2018.
Part of the agencies that are required to develop the required human capital for the economy is mandated specifically to provide industrial training, that is work-based learning, whereby we are
Ethiopia and Burundi. Kenya's exports to Africa accounted for 35% of total exports in 2018.
Part of the agencies that are required to develop the required human capital for the economy is mandated specifically to provide industrial training, that is work-based learning, whereby we are able to ensure that workers entering the labor market, workers within the labor market are skilled in terms of upskilling, in terms of skills upgrading, so that they are able to improve on their capacities to deliver in terms of productivity. Providing a training that is hybrid model of apprenticeship, where we basically the government has placed a lot of emphasis on upgrading of training facilities, and this is the same case with NITA, whereby every year we allocate resources to be able to allow us to acquire tools and equipment that tend towards matching those technologies in the industry.
This is KTN News.
As a platform for the voices of society, our Transform Kenya Forum will discuss the Kenyan manufacturing industry and its ability to change our national output, increase exports, and create numerous internal jobs. Join our panel as they discuss and share about manufacturing live from Daystar University, Nairobi campus, Valley Road. Follow the conversation on our social media platforms to share about manufacturing and how it can help Kenya achieve global economic success. Transform Kenya. Empower our nation.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And if you're watching us from home, you're watching Transform Kenya. Tonight, our focus is on the manufacturing sector in the country. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities, even as a country focuses on the sector in order to increase its contribution to the country's economy? And we're about to take some comments and questions from our audience right here with us. But before that, we spoke to Toyota Kenya on the challenges of doing business. Let's listen into that.
In the years 2015, 2016, and 2017, we've seen a decline in the market, where the market reduced by 30% and then another 23%. However, this year we're seeing an increase in the market, which is going up by 12% so far. We as Toyota Kenya have managed to increase market share by 5%. Last year and another 2% this year. So we were sitting on 20%, we're now back to 22%. So we've gained about 15%, to 20 to 22. So we've gained about 7% market share. We are one of the beneficiaries of the leasing which is currently taking place, and what we call NPS 4, which is now going to be delivered shortly. Toyota Kenya got a fair share, and we are going to be delivering 800 vehicles, 700 of the Land Cruiser pickups and 100 of the hardtops to the government, which I believe it's working well. We've been able to see more vehicles on the road, because it's a fully operational lease with a maintenance package that is actually being done on this. We've seen a lot of the vehicles being there, and which is also improving our security in the country where this is really going. This is also going to have a regional effect. We're also looking at a lot of policies being harmonized within the East Africa region. We've got a new motor policy which we're expecting. The government is reviewing a draft of the same currently, which will also see the growth, because it will bring about investment in the country. And even Toyota Kenya currently is carrying out feasibility studies to increase our CKD production in the country. With the new motor vehicle policy that will be introduced, it will address some of those taxation issues where CKD or local production, with the investments coming in, may make the vehicles more affordable. And we as Toyota Kenya would like to see a lot of Kenyans drive brand new vehicles. So what we would like to do is to perhaps continue with the lobbying with the government to reduce the age of the used cars that are allowed to come into the country, reduce those ones, which will ensure we have a fair competition and a playing field. In terms of the taxation, yes, with the CKD policy, we believe that will be bringing in more investments and would help with the tax policy. And on the other hand, we continue introducing new models which are more affordable to the general Kenyans to ensure that they will actually
Right, and we'll be keen to pick up on that, particularly in the motor sector, and some of the challenges and what are the proposed way forward. In the spirit of Buy Kenya, Build Kenya, it should be cheaper to buy a vehicle that is assembled in the country, no? So we'll be talking a little bit about that. But Abby is ready to pick some comments and questions from you in the audience. You could direct it to any panelist, and then we move this conversation forward.
Well, many thanks indeed, Sharon. We cannot talk about manufacturing without engaging our live audience this evening. And I just want to open up the floor to some questions. And of course, we want you to introduce yourself, saying what you do, and then you shoot your question in less than a minute. And I'd like to give the first opportunity to Vivian Ta, who is a fashion stylist. If we could get a mic to her side. All right, you can have this mic go over.
Hello, everyone. I'm actually a fashion designer. There's a difference. Okay, so my question goes to the CS, and it's in regards still to MSMEs that fall under clothing and apparel. We've had a bit of discussion around this, but I'd still just like to get, some firm commitment in regard to tangible support for MSMEs falling under the clothing and textile segment. We are currently at 74,000 plus small businesses under clothing and fashion. And just thinking about it, if you think about jobs that can be provided, if you just did, simple math of, 2 people employed for every small business, we're talking of 150,000 jobs. And we are happy as MSMEs to see that the government is supporting bigger manufacturers like the EPZ factories and the Rivertex. But what is the government doing for MSMEs in this sector? We've not seen any tangible budgetary allocation. Thank you very much.
More than a minute. CS, I'm sure you've taken note of that question. I also want to give an opportunity to this side of the hall. Yes, gentlemen, just introduce yourself and shoot your question to the specific panelist.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Isaac, a brand consultant and marketing at Hemco Designs Limited. I have 5, but they're point questions.
Let's stick to one for now so that we can have more people asking questions.
Okay.
Kindly.
The startup capital, it's been an issue among, especially when I'm speaking about the youth. You find the licenses, there are too many. Can't they be integrated into one body so that it becomes even easy for the local business or the youth to invest in particular manufacturing firms?
All right, thank you. One final question from the Mzee up here, so that we also give an opportunity to our elderly citizens.
Yes, good evening, members. My name is Major John Kipchumba. I'm the chairman Kenya Auto Bazaar Association. My question is specifically going fast to the PS on electricity. Is there any surplus electricity being generated in Kenya? Secondly, it goes to the CS subcontracting policy, whether it is there. Thirdly, to the CS again, the motor policy. They develop a policy and there's no consultation. Lastly, it goes to Udira Kapatse for Isuzu. On your assembly line, what are the local content? We understand that the local content from reliable sources say that the local content that being manufactured in Kenya are substandard. Is that true? That you cannot fit onto the vehicles? You need those components from abroad.
Thank you. Well, Sharon, if you allow me, let me ask one final question on our social media. And the question is from Samuel Orutua, is asking, my question goes to CS Munya. What is he doing to revive the many industries which have closed due to competition from cheap imports and counterfeit? We can produce locally and create and return jobs. CS, over to you.
Right, I think we can start with the first question, which came from our lovely fashion designer, talking about tangible support for the textile industry.
Yes, indeed, the government has a whole strategy for SMEs, very big strategy, and I think we'll need another Transform Kenya meeting to discuss SME sector on its own, because we may not be able to do justice in this meeting that we are discussing general manufacturing. But I wanted to say that all the incentives we are talking about here are not tailor-made for big industries. They are for all industries. So that when we talk about for example, the power rebates, they will apply across the board to all businesses, big or small. So reduction of electricity is for all industries and businesses. So that it's not, this is being geared towards bigger industries. And then even the industrial zones that we are starting, and I think that's where the question was really geared to. The industrial zones we are starting, we are also having SME parks within them. So it will not just be the bigger manufacturers alone setting up in those industries. It is bigger manufacturers, but also a section that will be set aside to make sure that SMEs also are able to manufacture there. Secondly, we are also, apart from the special economic zones that we are starting, we are also reviving the cottage industry, small manufacturing centers across the country, in the small towns, small ones that, like the KIE sheds she was talking about. We want to expand the KIE centers. We want MUSEA also to set up some of them in those centers. We are also finishing the constituency industrial centers that had been started, those stimulus that were not completed. Now we have budgets to complete them. So there is a whole strategy actually focusing on SME. The issue of credit, which she has raised, is true. Some of the funds that we have set up over the years have had impact, but they have not sorted out all the problems. And that's why, again, you can see us looking at specific tailor-made funds that are focusing on the sector, the SME sector that has been left out by the other funds that are existing, the youth fund, the women fund, the USO fund. There is still a category of SMEs who don't seem to get help within those existing funds. That's why we are setting another one now, and MUSEA that will be dedicated to people in Juakali, people in those small fashion industries, those who have been left out by those other funds. But we are also looking at expanding access, because part of the problem is we can start funds, but how many people will be able to access them? So that's why you saw us, we are looking at a guarantee scheme that will enable banks to open up the access to those who can't access funding because of current conditionalities. Right. So the guarantee scheme we are working about is for government to guarantee the risk element so that now banks can be able to open up. That then will have a bigger opening up for credit for all the SMEs that require them. Because government tailor-made solutions will not solve all the problem, because SMEs are coming up every day, young people are coming into business every day, so we need to look at a policy that will expand the space that are available for credit. So basically, I'm trying to assure her that when we have this forum, we will talk more about so many other things that we are doing here to support the SME in the textile sector, and even in other sectors that are there.
Right, and we'll get to the other questions, Bwana CS, in just a bit. Let me just allow the other questions. There's a question that was directed to Rita about where you source the stuff that you need. Do you source them locally, thus promoting local suppliers, or at what extent, perhaps?
So in the 1970s, when the country invited investors to come into the country to set manufacturing outfits, the local content supplier business also was booming. We have companies like City Radiators, if you can remember, was a booming secondary industry that was supplying radiators to the automotive industry, for example, and many more other industries. But when government policy changed to open up markets for serious competition before we had deepened our own local manufacturing, that led to the death or decline in some of those sectors. Only a few sectors are still remaining. So there was a big impact because the volumes were down. In the 1970s, we were selling about 13,000 vehicles that are new. It's only in 2015 after that that we came close to selling those numbers. So you can imagine if that policy remained consistent, how many secondary suppliers of local content would have generated. Having said that, locally, different products have different level of local content. So if you look, for instance, at a bus, large bus, the local content we are talking about there is about 80%. If you look at a smaller vehicle, the content is smaller. Given the market size and all that, still there is a lot of work that is being done to develop local content suppliers. And of course, for my industry, we deal in vehicles that need to be safe on our road. So we will not accept any form of local content without putting it through thorough testing and ensuring that they meet our compliance requirement for safety. So we develop suppliers. They become part of our value chain, because if the cost of a supply is higher, the cost of the vehicle will be higher. So supply development is a very, very integral part of what we do. Yes, there's a lot of local content, as you've heard, up to 80%. Minimum is about 70% of local. Can we generate more? Yes. And that's why we are pushing for the automotive policy to be passed. And in that automotive policy that we are talking about, there's an authority that we are asking to be formed, which is called the National Automotive Council. And the purpose of this council is to work with local suppliers to further strengthen and develop the local content organizations, creating a framework that we will be able to then discuss what does our industry require, and therefore who are the local content suppliers. At the end of the day, we have to be competitive as a country. So the product that is produced here in Kenya, we have to meet quality, cost, and delivery requirement.
Right.
And this is very key for any manufacturing, whether it's textile, whether it's auto, whether it's whatever. Quality, cost, and delivery is very important for manufacturing processes to continue. Mm-hmm. So yes, there's a big opportunity as we deepen manufacturing for development of local content.
All right. And let me just pin the other questions. There was a question that was directed to Bwana PS about whether we are producing actually surplus energy. There's also the question of startup capital. I've pinned those. I'm going to come back to them. But right now I want us to listen to another soundbite from the President Uhuru Kenyatta regarding value chain. There has been a lot of conversation about that we shortchange ourselves when we export our products in raw form. So what do we need to do? What are the gaps? Let's just listen into that.
We must be truthful with one another. Yeah? As they say, Rome wasn't built in a day. But what this requires is commitment. And that's why I have been very focused on trying to encourage our people that to achieve our objective, it will not be achieved through an environment of constant bickering and politicking. We must have a plan. And that plan may not be achieved totally during my term, right? But if we begin to lay the foundations and start building the blocks, we will have a house, at the end of the day. And this is why I have tried very much to reach out to my friends across the political divide and said, yes, politics will come, and there will always be a time for politics. And as a democracy, we accept that and we appreciate that. But it can't be every day. Because this vision that we have, a vision that we all agree on, cannot be achieved if we don't pool our resources, if we don't have the ability to discuss and talk to one another, right? And if we are constantly going to be looking at every single facet of what we do from the eyes of politics, we need to look at it from the eyes of the development agenda and the vision that we jointly have for Kenya. Vision 2030 is not Uhuru's vision. It's not Raila's vision. It's not Ruto's vision. It is not Kalonzo's vision. This is the vision that we have designed for ourselves as Kenyans. And we can only achieve it by working together. Yes, let us compete, because maybe we may have different ways achieving that particular agenda in terms of policy, in terms of programs, right? But at least we share that vision. So once the people decide that it will be this group of people who will lead this agenda for this particular time, let us support one another. And even if we criticize, let us criticize constructively, right? And I will continue to reach out to our people. I will continue to reach out to our leadership. I will continue across the divide, right? And that is the whole basis of my Building Bridges initiative, that what we do, we recognize, yeah, is not about me as president, but it is about 45 or 50 million Kenyans. I don't know what the census results will produce, right? And all we are is custodians who come and go.
All right, I think we got one that's broadly about the development agenda, and there's a different one on value addition, but we'll come to that later. Maybe let me unpin the question that was directed to PS regarding production of energy in the country. And I want to join it with that question that we had before we went on break, in terms of how much we welcome investment, foreign investment into the country, particularly where energy is concerned, in terms of trying to reduce this cost and therefore the cost of production.
Thank you, Sharon. Well, let me start with your last question. That is, how much do we welcome foreign investors? And let me start by saying that the reforms in our sector, and which started in 1997, focused on several areas. And one of the critical areas, and in the interest of time I will not talk about the others, is to encourage private sector investment in the sector. And I vividly remember that the very first independent power producer came on board around that time. And the reason why it was possible to bring in private investment is we had what we call a vertically integrated structure in the power sector. But we unbundled that vertical integration, and we came up with an independent generator and a regulator, and then an independent off-taker. At that time, the off-taker remained as Kenya Power and Lighting, and the generator was KenGen. And then we had what we call the Energy Regulatory Commission, which has changed the name. Now, those three bodies brought on board a framework or an enabling environment for private sector investment in generation. And the reason why those reforms took place in that form was to make sure that the generation is undertaken by both KenGen and private sector. And that has happened. At the moment, the power, the capacity that we have on the grid, about 35% is private sector and 65% is KenGen, which means at least the reforms have achieved their objective of facilitating private sector investment. That way, we have been able to ensure that the resources which are available from the government are channeled to mainly transmission, distribution, and retail. And then the private sector, complemented by KenGen, have continued to do the investments in generation. So yes, we do have a framework, and I dare say that the framework we have is possibly the most enabling in the continent. I think quite a good number of the other players in the power industry in various countries have been coming to us to benchmark in terms of creating that enabling environment, because we have got good physical regimes. You know very well that when it comes, for example, to exchange rate, in terms of allowing expatriation of the profits that the private sector, especially the international ones, makes, that enabling environment exists. And then we have also had that framework in the power sector where we have an independent off-taker from the generation. Now, in terms of whether we do have a surplus, I want to answer this question with numbers. We have, at the moment, a capacity of 2,712 megawatts. That is the installed capacity. And that capacity comprises of geothermal, hydro, thermal, wind, and solar. Wind and solar is about 400 megawatts. And wind and solar only prevails at certain times. We have got very good wind regime in Marsabit, and therefore we get about a load factor of 60%. Load factor is a description of how many hours on the average of wind that you get in a day, which is about 14 hours of, we're able to get 14 hours of wind on the average per day.
Right.
Solar, we get about half of that. It's just about 6 hours. And therefore, the wind and solar is only available at certain times. The hydro is not sustainable throughout. There are times when we got dry weather, and therefore the hydro is depleted. Both geothermal and thermal are available as you wish. Geothermal is available throughout. Thermal is available as you would want to use it. And I did say when I was making my first contribution that our thermal is about more than 30, almost 30% of the capacity. But we only consume 10% because thermal is a peaking plant. We use it during the peak time. And we don't necessarily use it during the other times because of the cost of the fuel. The capital investment is low, but the fuel cost is high. And that is why it is called a peaking plant. So 2,712 megawatts, that's the installed capacity. Our maximum demand is about 1,860 megawatts. So we do have about 900 megawatts extra. However, I have explained that you cannot get wind throughout, you can't get solar throughout, you don't want to use thermal throughout because if you use it throughout, you use too much fuel and there is quite a high cost of fuel. Geothermal is the flagship base source of our base load, and that is what we use to ensure that we run it throughout and we are able to drive the industries. Because again, the utilization of power is different. We only get 1860 megawatts during the peak time between 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock in the night. Thereafter, the utilization goes very low to about half of that. And during the day, it is about 80% of the peak. And you have to balance between the demand and the supply.
Right.
So we cannot really say that we are able to utilize the plants throughout. And therefore, any system in the world, because there are times when those power plants are being maintained, must have some reserves, so that when we are maintaining, then you are able to supply power throughout to the consumers who demand the power.
Right. I believe that your question has been answered. Let's move on to just drive a spotlight to the SMEs operations in the country. And there's a story that my colleague had put together that just will set this conversation for us. Let's take a look at that.
Today, I'm at Numeral IoT. It has been founded by Maurice Mbetsa, the man who created a device that can help you control things in your car from your mobile phone when he was just 19 years old. But Maurice is committed to ensuring that we are manufacturing technological devices from within Kenya. Already at Numeral IoT, there are so many that are happening and there's potential for so much more. But how does this SME face challenges when it comes to such manufacturing, and what needs to be done to help them flourish flourish and thrive? Let's find out. Many young people in the technology space harbor dreams of reaching the heights of Apple founder Steve Jobs.
And what we focus on is designing hardware.
Morris Mbetsa has the idol's images and quotes all over his office, among others. In a twist of fate and coincidence, just like Jobs, Morris did drop out of college to pursue his ventures.
We put the cans inside.
The innovator decided his passion for manufacturing technological devices was the path he would focus on.
Manufacturing technology devices in Africa, not only in Kenya. I'll give an example. If you're an artist, you write a song, you go to the studio, you record the song, you get a CD, take it to the media house, they play it. I would say the path is already there. But for technology, it was, personally for me, it was not there. So I had to figure out a lot of things.
Mbetsa is a reflection of the new crop of techpreneurs who are defining the new tech landscape. Always enriching his knowledge base, Mbetsa went to the USA with Yali, worked with major companies like Microsoft and IBM, and even went to China, which he refers to as the leader in manufacturing electronics in the world.
Straight from day one, when I wanted to go to China, I wanted to see how they manage to manufacture all these devices. What equipments do you need even to have to start doing the manufacturing? So I started doing the research, I made friends, I started learning the process, and I saw it's something that we can be able to do it here.
But what are the greatest challenges that plague companies like Numeral IoT, and are there any solutions forthcoming?
I would say the biggest challenge is the knowledge, because our education institution, they don't train us to be able to like manufacture stuff, because like we learn a lot of theory, but when it comes to now really like that idea, designing it, making a prototype, because a prototype and a product are two different things. Because a product is supposed to be, for example, if it's a car device, it's supposed to work in that car for, let's say, a minimum of 2 years. And power, we need them to like, maybe for startups like us, if they can be able to subsidize the power that we use, because it will encourage more people to invest. Again, the components, and not only the components, the equipments. Because for us to even to come to that stage whereby we start consuming components, we have to bring in the equipments.
Despite such challenges, there is a silver lining. During this year's budget reading, Treasury CS Henry Rotich proposed to exempt from VAT locally manufactured motherboards and all inputs used in their manufacture. This will make them more competitive against imported motherboards.
It was like a miracle, because personally we've not interacted with I would say we are one of the first people to set up such a facility where we focus purely on manufacturing motherboards. And it came as a surprise because we've not interacted with him, but I think he's seen the vision, he's seen the future is technology, manufacturing of this. Because if you see a mobile phone today, everybody has a mobile phone, but that is an employment that we exported to China or the US, and then the phone came.
Right, and from that story, one of the issues that has come up, and I want to bring you, Joseph, in this again, is that question of capacity building, training for specific, market-needed skills. And the question is, are we seeing any collaboration between academia and industry in research and innovation? Also technological advancement in order to, advance this industry.
Thank you, Sharon. You can see from that clip that the future of work is actually already with us. And we cannot run away from the fact that as a country, we need to embrace what we call Industry 4.0 at the moment. So as much as we're trying to interface where we are in terms of technology, that is the third industrial revolution with the fourth industrial revolution, we are saying that there should be a lot of emphasis in terms of all the skilling taxonomy, where the country is looking at the strategies to pre-skill workers, to upskill workers, to reskill workers. And I want to agree that at this point in time, we must focus on potentials to allow the demography dividend of youth to be able to access, to be creative, to be innovative. There are a lot of partnerships at the moment that are going on. If you look at the training providers in the country in terms of industrial training, in terms of vocational training, there's a lot of emphasis in terms of bringing the distance between the industry and the trainers very close. For example, under the Ministry of Labor with the National Industrial Training Authority, you know very well that we have a strong social partnership with the workers, with the employers. And therefore, the reason why there is this innovation and motivation for the employers to contribute to an industrial training levy at the rate of 50 shillings per employee per month. And this is then taken as a return on investment so that we see that the industries and the employers can be able to invest to make it sure that what is occurring in the industry in terms of these kinds of innovations, that capacities for our youth to be able to do 3D printing, capacities of our youth to be able to be given space to be more creative, are actually given a lot of attention. So I really agree with you that this is the kind of strategy that is ongoing in terms of making sure that in line with the SDGs goal number 17, that we must encourage partnerships between players, especially in the skilling ecosystem, that we really must be able to partner. And if we look even at this panel here, I'm happy to say that we're trying to work very closely with our partners in the industry. Several industries work closely, the motor vehicle sector industry. We are trying to work very closely with the CEO for Crown Paints. And we are saying that that is the only way that we can actually become closer in terms of the demands of the industry. So we want to say then that if that has to be achieved, then we must put a lot of emphasis to open up the space. And that space includes the fact that there should be a lot of vertical mobility and even cross mobility between the pathways that have been provided by the Kenya National Qualifications Framework. Right. And when we look at that, then we are saying that that kind of open space in terms of qualifications that will allow transitions from the schools to the tertiary to the training institutions will then motivate the providers of skills to see that we need to catch up with the global trend in terms of assuring a population that what the industry requires in terms of highly qualified, skilled manpower is actually achieved by supporting transfer of technology, transfer of skills, benchmarking across the economies that we feel are fairly close to us.
Right.
Thank you.
And just tying to that, Rakesh, what kind of partnerships are there or are necessary in terms of just providing a platform for the technical institutions also to create room for graduates to get internships and for mentorship, for apprenticeship? Are there that kind of partnerships in place?
Hello? Yeah. I think what we've been trying to do is try to empower the youth here. We would like to open a special training for the youth and the painters and contractors with a partnership with one of the biggest construction chemical companies in India, where we can train painters. We make them experts in painting solutions. We can make them experts in waterproofing solutions, because there's a perennial problem in this country where we can make these people expert. And we try to export people from here, because the painting skill is very important. If you look at all medalists in Dubai, the painters come from India. Why? Because they've been skilled, they are well trained. So that's what we've been trying to achieve, that we can create opportunities, create a school with partnership with NITA, and we train them, and we make sure that they're able to understand the technology, they can understand how the waterproofing systems work, and they can be able to provide the solution to the customers and add value to a brand. I think that's the only way I believe that various private sectors comes on way, because we have so many youth been graduating from schools, and probably they're getting lost where to go, what to do. So like one of the program which I would like to also, I'm trying to do is a woman entrepreneurship program where I would like to train a lot of women in, interior decorations and the painting solutions. So in county, they are available, and whenever someone need advice on painting and color decorations or color advice, they can able to provide some solutions, and they can able to make some money from themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
And just talking about that, we have a huge delegation from Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology, just talking about the place of academia. And one of the areas that has been said to be important in terms of revolutionizing the manufacturing sector is the use of technology for digital solutions. Maybe you can talk to us about that as an institution, that actually has a specification and, specialization rather in technology. What are you doing about that, the space of academia and research? Professor Mary Abukutsa and team.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. The Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology focuses mainly in agricultural aspects and technology and ICT. And to that end, we have specific colleges in terms of human resource development. We have a College of Agriculture and Natural Resource Sciences. We have a College of Engineering and Technology Development, and we have a College of Science where ICT is. To that end, actually, as a university, of Science and of Agriculture and Technology, we have developed several technologies and innovations, starting from undergraduate, and these innovations actually have taken care of agro-processing. We have a lot of products that are out there, but the problem is moving them out now to a larger level, larger production, but they are very good technologies and innovations. We have also a center that looks at, the institute that looks at energy and environmental technology, and here we are talking about renewable energy, and we have several technologies and solar technologies that can be used and picked up and solve that problem. And then we also have mining and mineral processing is a rare area that we have come up with. So what I'm saying, we have several technologies. We also have actually a whole research program called a research chair on manufacturing, and the chair is here. Maybe we'll give him a chance to talk about it. But what I'm saying is that we have all these technologies. The problem, the weak point is the collaboration, linking the universities, academia to industry so that we can move together. We have made some efforts to make sure that what we do is we are collaborating with industry. So we are actually members of LIWA, which is linking industry with academia, and we have other collaborations, but we are not there yet. We need to strengthen. Maybe we need the government to help academia and industry through policies that we can be able to pick up technologies we have developed at the university. For example, we have 45 over 50 patented technologies. They have not seen the light of day in terms of being produced because of the competition of other products from outside. Otherwise, we are actually playing a very important part as a university of agriculture and technology.
Right.
And we can pick up from there, and we have so much to offer. Thank you.
Okay, and just staying with technology in the industry, particularly SMEs, and I want to bring you, Flora, in on this. There was a report that was commissioned yesterday about the state of manufacturing in the country, and it showed that the sector needs a lot of work in terms of adopting new technologies such as automation, showing, for instance, that only 11% of the manufacturing sector is fully automated in the country. And even as the government, speaks about, subsidies in the manufacturing sector, cutting the cost of electricity and water what are some of the hindrances to full automation by manufacturing companies?
I guess one of the hindrances is actually just this, the size of the business. You tend to get SMEs tend to be generally smaller. access to capital is usually, when you're buying an asset, we don't have long-term financing. So you're buying an asset really on maybe perhaps asset financing for 4 to 5 years. Whereas other countries, they have long-term financing where you can spread the cost over a longer period. I believe that is one of the biggest challenges. The other challenge, I guess, is just access to markets. When you look at the cost of automation vis-a-vis perhaps the market that you're serving, as an SME, you need to perhaps then grow, to be able to access. I mean, you need bigger markets to be able to then justify the cost of actually the machinery that you have. The other one, of course, would be just knowledge. SMEs tend to not. Well, you start your business perhaps because you're very good in a particular industry, but capacity building is not something that has been encouraged or readily available. And I believe industry and academia, if they linked up together, then you'd be able to actually get the SMEs managing to grow. We saw this gentleman who was able to go to the Microsofts and to go abroad, but it's not many SMEs that would be able to do that. So I guess also just having either developmental partners, subsidies from government or something that would actually be able to scale these up. But having said that, and having been, very close to Kenya Association, previous chair of Kenya Association of Manufacturers, associations like those do actually help manufacturing. Like this morning, we launched a manufacturing hub. And the idea is to actually create a hub for industry, SMEs to be able to come in, gain if it is mentorship, gain knowledge, gain skills, linkages. We'll also be doing policy advocacy for them. And most importantly, also link them with partners. So if somebody's saying, I need to automate and I have no idea, we'd be able to mentor them with the likes of bigger companies like the ones we have right here and be able to say, go find out what they have, and you'd be able to go out and source and see what you have. So I believe part of it is just, lack of knowledge and capacity and just knowing what to do. Right. If I could talk a little bit about linking academia and industry, we do have a program also at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers where we take graduates from colleges. It's a program we're running with GIZ, and the universities then come in and learn immediately. They're interns. We take them for a period of 3 years. They come in and learn what exactly was the student ready? What more would you have expected with the student? How can we change our curriculum? So that way, if you have industry and academia very close together, you'll be able to have very relevant programs. And I think we've processed 1,000. We've taken from last year. We've taken 1,300, and I believe close to almost 300 or 400 of them have actually gotten permanent jobs. So these are relationships I would like to encourage us to form. And these are the kind of things that would be formed and that would be given under the manufacturing hub. And now that I have the mic, if I could talk to our fashion designer, this very morning, under the SME hub that we launched of KAM, PS Kibicho actually invited all our members of the hub to actually meet with the government on the 19th of July to actually have a conversation on SMEs, because he admitted government does not understand SME. It's not because, for whatever the reason, historically, they don't understand SME. And the invite is to actually have SMEs. In fact, the statement is, if you're too big, we don't want you in the room, to actually tell them what you want and so that they're able to prioritize and be able to get, to sort out your problem. If I say from where I sit, I have never seen in the last couple of, perhaps in the last year, a more, inclusive way of working. The government right now is actually talking to industry. They come, they talk to us, they sit down weekly, and I do know the PSs and CSs are meeting weekly, and we are having our matters sorted out very, pretty well. We saw a very favorable budget given towards manufacturing because we've been able to articulate and they've been able to listen and take back. And where they don't understand, like this one, Kibicho said, we don't understand you, come and talk to us. I also know they're having a manufacturer's retreat. So this is the time really to engage with government and private sector. Right. And finally, if I've not talked too much, I also feel we don't also need to leave everything to government. Private sector does and can take over some of the issues. Let's say creating linkages. And, they call it subcontracting. Subcontracting is a model that grew SMEs in Asia completely. here, yes, we are looking for a subcontracting policy, but a lot of companies have begun, and they say, listen, come and do my downlines, and they capacity build. I even know they give them, they give you credit. Somebody like EABL actually they aggregate farmers. So you come in, they aggregate you, they give you the inputs, the land, they give you the inputs, you have the land, they give you everything that you need, the knowledge, the capacity build, and then they net off and they buy back from you. So there are a lot of opportunities out there, linkages and subcontracting that are out there that private sector has actually been offering, and especially manufacturers, and will continue to do that. So I keep saying we need to move from being a trading nation to a manufacturing nation. And these are some of the opportunities that the youth, and I learned a new term today, they're called the youth society, would be able to take advantage of some of these things, because there are a lot of organizations that are being able to give. I do know manufacturers now that are giving credit lines.
Right.
So you come in and say, listen, I want to supply the housing, but I don't have money to buy mabatis. I know the mabati people are doing this right now. So kindly give me credit. I will make what I'm making to supply. I think maybe that's not a perfect example, but that is the idea. And a lot of manufacturers now, in light of supporting SMEs, are doing this. So there are a lot of opportunities that are being given, yes, by government, can be given by government and are being given, but private sector is also at the table.
Right. And P.S. Njoroge, when you talked about energy being production is low cost at night, and that we have a bit of excess power. So why has the 24-hour production not taken off yet?
The 24-hour production, Sharon, is quite prevalent in most of the large industries. They operate on a 24-hour cycle. However, we would wish that most of the SMEs operate also on 24/7. And one of the facilitation that the government has engaged in, especially in the small and large urban areas all over the country, is installation of street lights. These street lights are supposed to enhance security at night and also enhance 24/7 economy, so that we can be able to do much more during the night in terms of manufacturing at even a lower cost, because we do have a time of use which would be very applicable to the small and medium enterprises, because they would be able to double the production they have, or even to increase the production they have, and be able to get that extra at a lower cost. For the large industries, they will require maybe to do an extra line of production, so that they can be able to increase whatever they have at the moment. So in essence, what we have done is to make sure that the SMEs, the metering on the SMEs is also changed so that it can be able to accomplish the 24/7 and have time of peak and time and off-peak time. And I have seen several small industries benefiting from that. We do have some figures on that.
Right. And we're about to take the next round of comments and questions. So if you have quick ones, we can take them before we go to our next subject on customs.
So Sharon, indeed some very enriching discussion there. Let me quickly throw it to this young gentleman. Just shoot your question straight. We don't have much time.
Thank you. The Kenya National Bureau of Statistics reported that the GDP contributed by manufacturing sector has been stagnating around 10%. And Bwana CS, and I'm happy Honorable Moses Kure is here. What policy measures are you putting in place, as well as legislative, to make sure that we move this manufacturing sector to the next level? Lastly, right now there is a laid emphasis on technical skills. A while ago, there was an emphasis on a degree. So, and many university graduates right now are more trained on management and administration. And our technical institutions are producing technical skills. So are we at a point where we need to pair a university graduate and a technical student so that they jointly start businesses, a university for decision making, the technical student for implementation. Thank you. My name is Edwin from Kakamega.
All right, thank you, Edwin. Well, we're still taking more questions. And CS, of course, a lot of reactions already coming out, but we just want to get your quick response to this, as you'll also involve the Gatundu South Member of Parliament. He'll also talk about what they're doing as parliamentarians in terms of addressing legal issues when it comes to SMEs, coming up with the right policy frameworks. But CS, let me have you come first, then we can get the MP for Gatundu South.
Well, I think I already, at the beginning, at the opening session, I highlighted the specific sectors that we are intervening in and the policy environment that we have created that is geared towards accelerating industrial transformation. Mm-hmm. But there were specific questions asked in that relation that I didn't respond to. For example, the issue of subcontracting. She has talked about the private sector subcontracting policy, but I said at the government level, the local content policy is also encouraging subcontracting, so that most government contracts now are required. If you are a big contractor, you are required as part of local content to make sure that you buy local materials. If you are in road construction, if it is services, then you have to get, local providers, SME to provide the services. So the subcontracting policy is actually there.
All right.
What we are looking at is an innovative way of enforcing it so that it is not circumvented, because many of those contractors have ways of circumventing that policy by overpricing and then making it difficult for locals to access those services.
All right.
So then, of course, as I said, government is also now focusing on making sure that when government is buying, because government is also a big buyer, when it is buying, unless it is unavailable locally.
Okay.
That's the only time you'll be allowed to buy from outside.
All right. Thank you, CS. And let me just rope in Moses Kuria. Of course, a man sometimes who steps on people's toes, but today you promised me you won't do this. But just talk to us about the role of Parliament in less than a minute, sir.
Thank you, indeed, Abi. I've been sitting in the budget-making process for 5 years now, and realizing the resource constraints within which we operate. It is very clear to me that the solutions to this country lies with the private sector, not with government. I'm sure CS and PS, because we engage in these budget processes, will agree with me on that. And so these discussions are extremely healthy and very timely. As regards to the specific measures we are making, especially for manufacturing, first of all, on the issue of VAT, because I think these are a very fundamental issue. We already have lined up in Parliament a legislation that will enable our manufacturers to net off their VAT refunds against their tax liabilities. I think that's important. Now, if you compare that further now with the announcement by the CS for National Treasury, who proposed and which we are going to support when we discuss the finance bill, that we reduce now the withholding VAT from 6% to 2%. And then if you add that 2% is then again netted off, that becomes very important. The CS on the issue of buy Kenya, build Kenya, 40%, the local content, we are very determined as Parliament to actually remove it from just being in the policy books. And we are going to pass legislation that will make it mandatory to buy Kenya. And we ask government to start with that. For the construction center, the other day we had a discussion with Rita about BRT buses, which Kenya was buying from South Africa, but Tanzania is buying its BRT buses from Kenya. And you wonder, where is our priority? What are you talking about? I'm getting very, very concerned about our regional competitiveness. Uganda, our biggest market, is now very busy preparing to sell to us. And we are having fright of all these businesses, manufacturing companies from Kenya to the region. So these are conversations that we look forward to have, not only with the private sector, but also with the executive.
Thank you, sir. I think he deserves a round of applause for that. And of course, local content is very dear to the president, and we just want to listen in on what President Uhuru Kenyatta did say when you talk about local content and buy Kenya, build Kenya.
I think for a very long time, people have always thought that maybe imported goods are better, maybe looking at labels and looking at tags, and we encouraged that ability to not appreciate, our own products. And that's why we came up with this policy of buy Kenya, build Kenya, right? Encouraging our people to buy local goods, saying that in government, a certain percentage of the goods that we buy as a government must come from Kenyans. Encouraging ourselves to buy local material and local fabrics. That's why today, and I said when I was up as we were launching Rivertex the other day, I said, look, even us in government, one day wear Kenyan clothes and be proud of what our young designers and Kenyans are making. To begin to be able to develop a culture that we are proud of what our own brothers and sisters are actually making, and to promote it and to become good buyers.
Well, of course, Sharon, as you've heard there from the president, razor-sharp insights that have been buttressed by the Member of Parliament for Gatundu, that is Moses Kuria. But Sharon, looking at the big picture, as we talk about manufacturing, the big conversation right now is how do you involve the young people so that they can also join this bandwagon when it comes to export promotion?
Right. And that's a very good question also that came up earlier about startup and accessing funds for startups. Is a question that we had not had addressed, and this is what I'd like to throw now to the CS, just to talk about access to credit.
Yes, indeed, access to credit has been a major impediment for the growth of SME sector in the country, and apart from many constraints that we have talked about. And government has been alive to this challenge, and we've worked out a strategy and a program on how to expand access to credit for SMEs. Apart from the existing, credit schemes that already the ones we talked about, the youth fund, the women fund, and all the others, and even the private sector banking that is already provided. Government has come up with a policy intervention that we are calling the, credit guarantee scheme, that is intended to guarantee the risk element so that banks now can be able to open up credit to SMEs. I think that is going to help in a big way, because a lot of times banks say, we risk our money because most of these SMEs don't have collateral or security for the money we lend. Mm-hmm. So government is saying we can take over that element, which is worked around at 20%. We guarantee that element. Then we make sure you also lend this money. So government will make sure that once that is guaranteed, then you are able to lend the money.
Right.
That will open a big window so that money which is in banks is not able to lend is lent. Secondly, we are also starting within Micro and Small Enterprises Authority an SME fund that will again lead to those that cannot even access credit within that guarantee scheme. We have also development partners who have come together who are working again with the government to open another window that will again support the SMEs. And you also add the central bank also opening another window for SME lending. So we are on the right track. we believe this SME fund is going to be working already. The regulations are being concluded right now. There is a committee that is working out the regulations, so that once the money and the new budget is in, then this fund will start functioning, and then we will be able to start lending. Of course, there are institutions within government that are also lending already. They have been lending. KAE is one of them. Industrial Development Bank is the other one that has also been lending. So the MCA fund will be additional lending window within government. We are also looking at actually increasing the supply of money to KIE. In fact, this financial year, KIE was allocated, I think, 1.7 billion to be able to also continue lending and incubating SMEs.
Right.
What we need to do, and I think this is where we are moving, is also do a proactive sensitization so that SMEs can be able to access information. Because the biggest challenge with SMEs is also accessing information.
Okay.
And also simplification of processes for them to access this credit. So it's not just availability, there is also all that issue of capacity building also for SMEs to be able even to know how to write proposals, to be able to see how to be followed up when they have been able to access this credit, to follow them up to see that that credit is utilized properly, and holding them as you incubate them and as you give them the resources, and also as you capacity build them. Those are the whole strategy.
Right.
And that's why I was saying we need a Transform Kenya Day for SME, that we can talk about the SME strategy on its own without mixing it with so many other things that we are talking about today.
Right. And the president was talking about the promotion of a culture where we actually buy Kenya, build Kenya. But Rita, are we employing the right strategies in terms of marketing these products even to the local market? For instance, are we looking at what the consumer actually needs, desires, so that you're actually able to sell to them?
I think that's a challenge. Maybe in my sector, I would say yes. But again, looking at the SME, quality is very, very important because the consumer is looking for a good product. They're looking for a quality shirt. They're looking for a quality vehicle. So we have to address the quality, of course, issues of packaging and all that are very, very important, and price. So, yeah, so we really have to market and package, not only for local market, but for regional markets as well. But for me, the challenge is around, as we are developing SMEs, and there are SMEs that are already serving industry. I think prompt payment of SME is another big challenge that we have. Because yes, government has opened opportunities for SME to do business. But the level of delay to pay SMEs, some of them have to close shop. So I think now that we have parliamentarians in the House, Bwana Kuria, we need to really accelerate the prompt payment bill. SMEs are struggling out here because of lack of payment. Yes, they can generate quality products and all that, but they don't get paid as well.
Right, and just talking about regulations, ease of doing business, Rakesh, the data by the manufacturers lobby shows that by August of 2018, 23 manufacturers were owed 3.59 billion shillings. This comprised 2.68 billion in withholding VAT dues and 908 million in VAT export. Now, there was a new VAT refund formula that was launched, just essentially reverting to the previous system where the tax refunds were based on the difference between output and input tax. This formula was just launched the other day. Do you think this will benefit manufacturers, and in what way?
Yeah, of course, definitely. I think any initiative has come to pay back to the manufacturers going to work, because the cash flow is a very key parameters to be successful. I think we all know that Kenya is suffering at the moment. And cash back to the systems maybe is back to the consumer again. So it definitely going to help us a lot. Like, for example, we have adulteration duties on one of our kerosene, which has been causes a lot of problems. Like, we almost all industry put together, 80 million shillings in line with industries. So basically what happened, the rotations become stagnant and it's become jam, and it's very difficult for us to keep on borrowing money from the banks, and the cost of overheads goes up. So I think this is one of the great initiative, but we always say let's talk walk. It has to be walk. If we keep on talking and when the initiatives comes, I think I personally feel that deadline has to be given, deadline has to be made. Otherwise, we keep on talking with each other and probably will not find the solution. But I can tell you, if it's happened, this economy can grow by another 3 to 4% of Kenya. I can challenge that.
Right. And PS Njoroge, in 2017, renewable energy generated 6,191 terawatt hours of electricity, 5% up from 2016. Globally, talking about global energy share, how is Kenya faring?
Thank you, Sharon. Kenya is one of the countries with the highest contribution of green energy in the mix. Indeed, when I was explaining, I did say that our thermal contribution, which is the non-green, is just about an average of 10%, which means in terms of energy production, our green energy comprises in the region of 90%, because geothermal is green, hydro is green, wind is green, solar is green. Only thermal, which is non-green. And the conversation we have had is to drive more in terms of green energy production by concentrating a lot on geothermal. And that's why I did say in the next 1 month or so, we shall be commissioning yet an additional geothermal power plant. We call it Okaria 5, 168 megawatts. That will now bring our installed capacity to about 2,880 megawatts. And out of that, again, we will see a further increase in green energy. Perhaps we would expect that our green energy component in the next 2 months or so will certainly get to about 92 to 94%, and only 6% will possibly be non-green.
Right. I think we can take our final one question. I'm told and then we'll open up a bit later when we go off.
All right, one burning question. Can I have the gentleman at the far end?
Thank you very much indeed. My name is Professor Akelo, Jalango Akelo. I'm a teacher for a long time. I'm very proud that I've transformed Kenya through John Njoroge. Congratulations. The issue of manufacturing is at heart of all Kenyans. We are now talking in Nairobi, but of the 45 million or so people, we have rural people who you would call, the majority of whom are the youth society. So we need also to extend way beyond the automotive, painting, to look at these SMEs in the rural areas. That's one statement. I have a question. CS, we are setting up industrial parks or industrial zones. Normally, these industrial zones are centered around universities to encourage what we call the triple helix: government, industry, academia linkages, which has been referred to here. There we are very weak. Kenya is very weak in that triple helix. And therefore, one is asking, where are you placing these industrial parks? Are they around universities where we can contribute the little we have based on a ratio of 1 to 10 to 31 engineer, 10 technicians, 30 artisans, the old policy?
All right, Prof.
Now, I want to make a comment, a question. Do we have any policy, either Ministry of Labor or industrialization or general government, which will guide universities in terms of admission to engineering, science and technology, which will spur manufacturing? Do we have any policy? in terms of ratios which will guide admissions to universities, because we are churning out more engineers than technicians and technologists. And so we're churning more managers compared to the real operators. Right. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Well, Sharon.
I think we can take that question.
Well, I think the issue of the disconnect between academia and industry and skills is a big issue in this country. And clearly, that's why you've seen government agenda being driven more to technical education and all that. The industrial parks we are setting up are some kind of special zones where we are trying to accelerate industrialization by providing the infrastructure that is necessary and giving incentives that are very attractive so that industries can set up very quickly. So it's a strategy to accelerate, because if we take the normal way, it will take a while. Now, the fact that universities may not be neighboring, we can link university through technology to those facilities, since you are talking about innovation and all that. So we are setting up the biggest one in Naivasha, breaking ground in August, Kisumu, Mombasa, Ndongokundu, and Lamu. But we are also reviving the old ones. I remember somebody asked that question. Like we have revived Rivertex, we are set to revive Kikomi in Kisumu, Mountex in Laikipia. Those are textile industries that are going to help us revive the cotton industry that was quite big in this country. So the issue of academia and practical technical skills that are required is a big issue. Because over the years, we have emphasized issues of degrees, get a degree, get another one, but we didn't ask ourselves, these degrees, who is the employer? Who is going to employ these people out there? And we have enough jobs for just academic degrees. And this mind shift that is there and is taking place needs to go even further. We need, even the engineers we are producing. Do they really? A lot of times I'm told some even get to be trained by technicians when they go to the factories, because the technicians have done the practical work. Right. The engineer did a lot of theory. So practical, skill-based education, that's the way to go. Even as we, of course, require research, right, and the universities and all that, but we need that shift that will take time. Finally, on 10th of this month, we will be launching a competition for youth to get money, startup capital that people have been talking about. It's a program we are running with the World Bank, and those who will win in the competition will get up to 3 million Kenya shillings to start businesses. So start writing your proposals. I'm asking the young people here who want to access capital to start writing proposals and participate in this nationwide competition that will be launched on 10th. On Wednesday, you submit your proposals. KPMG will be doing the analysis, so there is no corruption that will be there. There will be no cutting corners, right, so that relatives are taken and given money. So it's a very open, transparent process that will have the very best proposal win for you to start accepting money.
Okay, we'll take like 2-3 more questions after this break, but at this point, because we are breaking for KTN Prime, I'd like to invite our CEO, Mr. Orlando Liomu, just to say a few words, and then we'll open up to take, I know we haven't taken as much questions, so that we can have them addressed before we close. Mr. Orlando.
A round of applause as he makes his way.
Thank you, Sharon. You'll all agree with me that it's been a very interesting conversation. We've heard about almost everything, escalating costs because of certain things, value addition areas that the government is focusing on, our source of energy and the mix, between clean and that which is not very clean. Cottage industries, which I think are critical. If you look at countries like India, cottage industries played a very key role in the industrialization at a small scale. Access to credit, which I believe is a big problem for anyone in the SME. Prompt payment. I can't even emphasize that. I know a lot of small businesses that have shut down. Of course, linkages between industry and academia. I'm happy that as Standard Media Group, we actually do intentionally try to get students who are doing journalism and other support areas to come as interns. And every year we commit to a certain number just to provide that linkage. And of course, there was a TVET issue. I think we've been at the forefront of championing the resurgence of TVET for the last about 4 years, because the truth is we were training too many chiefs and we're forgetting that they needed some Indians to work with them. So let me go straight to the speech. Because of time, I'll try not to go off the written speech. Our panelists, Cabinet Secretary, Trade, Cooperatives and Industry, Peter Munya, PS Ministry of Energy, Engineer Joseph Njoroge, PS Ministry of Industry, Trade and Cooperatives, State Department of Investment and Industry, Betty Maina, Honorable Moses Kuria, MP Gatundu South, Acting Director General, National Industrial Training, NITA, Stephen Ogenga, CEO Crown Paints, Mr. Rakesh Rao, CEO Melvin's Marsh International Kenya, Flora Mutahi, MD General Motors, Isuzu Motors East Africa. I always get to forget that. I beg your pardon. Rita Kavashe, guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I would like to welcome you to the Transform Kenya edition on industrialization, which we believe is a very critical subject for our country today. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this evening of the Transform Kenya edition. This is a forum that provides an opportunity for industry stakeholders, businesses, national and county governments, and the citizenry to engage on issues affecting the nation and offer possible solutions. Since we launched Transform Kenya Forum in June 2018, we have held discussions on issues of national concern, including the environment, health, national food security and nutrition, basic education, higher education, and standardization. Tonight, we address issues that touch on the state of manufacturing in Kenya. This topic is specifically of great interest to us as a media house and also to the country at large because it is one of the big four agenda. Kenya's manufacturing sector has been contributing an average of 10% to the GDP in the last 7 years from 2008 to 2014. However, this contribution has been on a declining trend and now stands at about 7.7% by 2018, according to the Economic Survey report of 2019. It is worth noting that the government intends to reverse this declining share of manufacturing sector through a raft of policy strategies. The latest initiative, like I mentioned, is the Big Four agenda in which the manufacturing sector is one of the pillars. Tonight, therefore, we hope to explore ways in which the share of the manufacturing sector could rise to 15% of GDP by 2022. In conclusion, I want to thank you for honoring our invitation. We don't take it for granted that you found time out of your busy schedules to be here this evening, and may I add, contending with the difficult traffic we had today. I'm sure a lot of you got caught up in that. I personally actually had to abandon my driver and walk so that I could make here on time. I wish to thank all our panelists for agreeing to share their wealth of knowledge and experience with us. The Standard Group believes in forging long-term partnerships, and that has been mentioned earlier, that play a critical role in transforming Kenya into a prosperous society that empowers all its citizens. Finally, I would like to give special thanks to our partners, Ministry of Industry, Trade and Cooperatives, Ministry of Energy, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, the National Industrial Training Authority, Isuzu East Africa, Daystar University for continuously playing host to our Transform Kenya events, and of course, Pwani Oil Products. And as we continue to the next phase of our discussions, I would like to ensure you that we are keenly following this. As a group, we want to continue providing a platform for the discourse that we are listening today, because all this can be discussed, but if it cannot reach the citizens of Kenya, if we cannot provide the platforms for people to have these discussions, then a lot of these discussions will end up where they were just discussed, in the rooms they were discussed in. So we want to play a critical role as media to ensure that we plug into the government's agenda of ensuring Kenya goes to become a first world country. Thank you and enjoy the evening.
Thank you very much to our CEO, Mr. Orlando Oliomu. And we're taking a break. Your pen? Oh, I thought I was lucky. We're taking a break to have our KTN Prime news, but we'll continue shortly to take a few more questions for our viewers who are watching us from home. This is where we leave you. Many thanks for making time to be part of this conversation. If you're following it online on our various social media platforms, let's continue. You can actually shoot your questions on Twitter, on Facebook. We are following that up using the hashtag TransformKenyaSG. So we'll see you later. Have a good night.
Continue the conversation on our social media platforms to discuss manufacturing and how it can help Kenya achieve global economic success. Transform Kenya. Empower our nation.